From KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Geothermal is having a moment in the spotlight. It hasn't gotten the attention that wind and solar have as the powerhouses of Colorado's electric grid. But energy officials say it's time for the state to start building up other sources, like tapping the heat that's under our feet. The state is offering grants and tax credits to support research into new geothermal projects, with the goal of bringing some small and large-scale projects online in the coming years. With all this activity happening, we wanted to understand more about why geothermal has the potential to reduce energy costs and stabilize the electric grid. Will Torr is the executive director of the Colorado Energy Office. Will, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, it's great to join you.
When I think about geothermal energy, I have to be honest, what comes to my mind is geysers or hot springs, maybe volcanoes. But we actually do have access to geothermal sources here in Colorado, right? Where do we find that here?
Well, there's a couple of different kinds of geothermal we have access to. One kind is essentially everywhere in the state, and that's geothermal heating and cooling, where you're just using the fact that there's a constant temperature underground as a source for running what are known as heat pumps that allow you to do very inexpensive and very low pollution heating and cooling of buildings. But the other opportunity is that we've got a number of areas across the state where there's hot rock not that far beneath the surface, and where there is an ability to use new technologies to do geothermal electricity production from that hot rock.
And is this something that's used for large utilities or large power plants, or are there smaller scale applications also for things like individual homes or maybe schools?
So for individual buildings, what you would be doing is geothermal heating and cooling, or we're increasingly seeing groups of buildings like campuses or new housing developments. Probably the best known project in Colorado is at Colorado Mesa University, which has an amazing geothermal heating and cooling system. Right now, it provides 70% of their heating and cooling.
Wow.
And they're in the process of expanding it so it will be 100% of their heating and cooling. It's such inexpensive way of conditioning their buildings that their president has said that it has allowed them to keep tuition about 2% lower than it would otherwise be.
Oh, how interesting. We have a pretty good deal of focus on wind and solar power here in the state. Solar power, very effective because it's always hot here. Will, how does geothermal fit into Colorado's renewable energy goals and helping us make progress there?
I think geothermal is going to play an important role going forward. There is no doubt that wind and solar are the workhorses of the clean energy transition. Wind and solar are just so inexpensive. They're about half the cost of just operating a coal plant. So as we move into the future, the vast majority of our electricity will come from wind and solar. But as we move towards a grid that is largely going to be renewables, you also need some sources that are available 24/7 to back up the wind and solar.
Right
now, what we use for that is natural gas generation, and we will continue to use gas for many years. But geothermal offers a zero pollution source of that 24/7 electricity.
I'm curious what barriers lie in the way of taking advantage of geothermal power in Colorado.
On the electricity side, it really does involve some new technology. The older geothermal electricity technologies only worked in a small set of geological conditions. So you tended to see them sort of around hot springs or geysers, in places like California and Nevada.
Sure.
But there are new developments that are allowing geothermal in a much broader array of locations. And one of the things I'm very excited about is over the last couple of years under Governor Polis's leadership, where he really wants us to tap the heat beneath our feet, we've created a state geothermal grant program and a set of geothermal tax credits to help support development of this, new industry within our state.
Yeah, I saw there are grants going out to a number of communities for some of these projects. What are you feeling optimistic about?
Well, one of the things that was really exciting to see, we opened the grant program this spring, and there was kind of an overwhelming response. We got applications from all across the state. We're really seeing interest from campuses and developers and utilities and a wide variety of different types of applications of geothermal. So that was pretty exciting to see.
I'm curious, too, to know if this could be an option for communities that are getting rid of their coal-fired power plants. I'm kind of thinking about Craig.
Where I think that there's a really interesting opportunity for geothermal in terms of sort of just transition for fossil fuel communities is also around sort of the oil and gas industry. One of the projects that we are going to be funding through the grant program, for instance, involves repurposing an old oil and gas well for geothermal purposes.
Right.
When you think about the types of work that's involved, for geothermal, it is drilling holes and installing pipes and doing compressors. So it's very similar to the work in the oil and gas industry. So we think that there will be real opportunities, especially for those workers and those communities in the oil and gas areas of Colorado, to move into geothermal. One of the things that's actually pretty interesting to see is that a lot of the advances that we're seeing in geothermal are actually coming from companies or people who've been in the oil and gas industry and who are taking the skills that they've developed and the technology that they've developed to drive down the cost of drilling, for instance, and applying it to geothermal.
What is it that excites you most about the prospect of more geothermal in Colorado?
One is just the opportunity for people to save money. We are talking a technology that once you've built it has incredibly low energy costs and incredibly low pollution that comes along with it. It also means that will limit the amount of additional electricity demand. And then just the potential for large-scale geothermal electricity production really does mean that there's a real potential for being able to get, not just to like 95% lower pollution, but really almost all the way to zero.
Wow.
That's pretty darn exciting.
I'll say it is. Will Torr is the executive director of the Colorado Energy Office. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, you're very welcome. I really appreciated the conversation.
Before we go today, if you've listened this far, we want to share a couple ways you can interact with the show. First, there's the In The NoCo newsletter, headlines and updates from the KUNC newsroom delivered to your inbox every week. You can head to kunc.org to subscribe. And if you want to tell the In The NoCo team what's happening in your corner of Colorado, you can drop us a line, send an email or a voice memo to noco@kunc.org. That's NOCO@kunc.org. And that's it for us today on In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Thank you so much for listening.